You've hit your ceiling. We're raising the bar. That's what he said, sliding the termination papers across the desk like he was offering me a lunch menu. My name is Emma Sinclair. I'm 38 years old, and until last Friday, I was Senior Business Strategist at Redwood Dynamics, a mid-sized tech consultancy in Austin, Texas. I worked there for nearly 11 years. No sabbaticals, no long vacations, just steady, consistent performance. Results. The kind of work people build careers around. The kind of loyalty companies claim to reward. I brought in 60% of Redwood's revenue last year. That's not an exaggeration. It's a number from our own internal quarterly reports. My accounts weren't flashy startups or short-term deals. They were long-term partnerships I'd cultivated over the better part of a decade. Names like Calyx Corp, Ventura Holdings, and Parallax Biotech. Clients who didn't just trust Redwood. They trusted me. But none of that mattered on Friday. "You're plateauing," Nathan, my boss of 3 years, said while adjusting his cufflinks. "The industry is shifting, and we need people who can think beyond the current model. Disruption is the name of the game now." I watched his mouth move, but all I heard was static, like a man reciting lines from a book he didn't write. What Nathan didn't say, but I already knew, was that he had hit a ceiling too. And someone had convinced him that the only way up was to stand on the shoulders of people like me. 3 months earlier, they'd brought in Jordan Chase, fresh MBA from Stanford, to shadow me. No explanation. Just an email from Nathan. "Let's bring Jordan up to speed. He'll be a great addition to your team." Shadowing, a polite term for extracting. Jordan was polite, curious, sharp in a textbook kind of way. But he had no instinct, no client memory. He didn't know the CEOs I'd built trust with over awkward dinners and early morning flights. He didn't know that Ventura's CFO, Lydia, only signed when I personally walked her through risk forecasts over coffee at 6 a.m. for a week straight. He didn't know the human side of those deals, the glue. But Nathan thought Jordan was the future. Young, hungry, cheap. And I was legacy software in their eyes. When he handed me the papers, Nathan smiled. That fake, corporate, smoothed-over smile that managers wear when they need to look like they're doing you a favor. "We'll, of course, honor your severance and unused PTO. And if you'd like a reference..." I held up my hand and stopped him mid-sentence. "It's okay," I said. "I won't need a reference." I packed up in silence. My framed photo of Olivia's dance recital. The mug that said, "Data Whisperer from the Christmas party I skipped last year to finalize the Calyx Corp renewal." A binder of notes. My personal notebook. My real asset. The one they hadn't seen. As I walked out, the receptionist looked up, confused. "Taking a break?" I smiled. "Something like that." I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't play music or call anyone. I just drove in silence, my hands steady on the wheel, thinking not about what I'd lost, but about what they'd just done. They thought they were cutting fat, but they'd just severed the artery. At home, I placed the box on the dining table and stared at it. 11 years in 1 square foot of cardboard. Then I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and looked through my personal records, contacts, contracts, expiry dates, renewal cycles, things I kept meticulously, not because I didn't trust Redwood, but because I knew someday they'd stop trusting me. My phone buzzed. A message from Lydia at Ventura. "Looking forward to our Q4 planning call. Still good for Tuesday?" I stared at it for a long time. She didn't know yet. None of them did. But they would. And that's when it hit me. Not sadness, not even anger. Just clarity. This wasn't a setback. This was my starting point. Nathan thought he was ending something on Friday, but all he did was set Monday in motion. I didn't respond to Lydia's message that night, or to the 3 other unread emails waiting in my inbox. One from Parallax, confirming next week's executive retreat. Another from Calyx Corp, checking on updated pricing models. And one from Nathan, subject line. "Let's make this a smooth transition." Smooth. The word stuck in my throat like a pebble. I spent the weekend in silence, not sulking, not panicking, just processing. The house was still. Olivia was at her dad's place, and I didn't turn on the TV. No background noise. Just me, the glow of my laptop, and 11 years of history in front of me. Notes, client rosters, renewal calendars. A list of every contract I'd helped close. The numbers didn't lie. I wasn't just a top performer, I was the spine. What they'd fired wasn't an employee. It was the connective tissue between Redwood and its clients. But I didn't storm into Nathan's office or blast a LinkedIn post. That's not who I am. No, my kind of revenge doesn't need a microphone. It just needs timing and silence. By Sunday evening, I'd created a private spreadsheet. Phase 1, awareness. No threats, no drama. Just a simple truth to the right people. I started Monday with one call. Lydia Caldwell, Ventura's CFO. "Emma," she answered, chipper. "You ready for Tuesday? I've already got the agenda sketched out." "I won't be attending," I said calmly. "I'm no longer with Redwood." There was a pause, long enough to tell me she'd been blindsided. "What? Since when?" "Friday. They let me go, said I'd hit my ceiling." Lydia exhaled sharply. "Are you serious? You built this account?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Then came the questions. Who will be taking over? What about our analytics integration? The Q4 budget review? "I'm not sure," I said. "They didn't give me a handover plan?" Wow. She was quiet, then added, "Well, when you land somewhere, let me know." That was it. No pitch, no plea. Just a simple truth spoken directly. I made 4 more calls that day, each to a senior decision maker I'd worked with for years. Each conversation nearly identical. "I'm no longer with Redwood." No, I wasn't planning on leaving. They decided to make a change. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not through a generic email. By 2 p.m., my phone was buzzing nonstop. And by 4 p.m., Nathan emailed again. "Hi, Emma. Just a heads up. Some of your former accounts have reached out with questions. Can we coordinate a time to discuss transition strategy? We'd like to keep everything moving forward smoothly." That word again. Smooth. I ignored it. Instead, I opened a new tab and pulled up the contact info for Elliot Carmichael, managing partner at Stratagem Group, a consultancy I'd spoken to 3 years ago at an industry summit. They'd tried to poach me then. I'd turned them down, but he'd given me his direct number and said, "If you ever want to build something real, give me a call." So I did. "Emma Sinclair," Elliot answered immediately, like he'd been expecting me. "You still looking for someone to build something real?" I asked. He laughed. "Always." We met for lunch the next day at a quiet bistro in downtown Austin. No contracts, no promises, just a conversation. I laid it out plainly. 60% of Redwood's active revenue tied to relationships with me. 8 major clients whose renewals were coming due within the next 60 days. A potential revenue swing north of $12 million. Elliot didn't blink. "What do you need?" he asked. "Autonomy," I said. "Respect, and a seat at the table." "Done," he said without hesitation. By Thursday, I had a signed agreement. Director of Strategic Accounts at Stratagem. Signing bonus, performance-based equity, and most importantly, freedom to reach out. I didn't go scorched earth. That's not my way. Instead, I reached out only to those clients I had personal, long-standing relationships with. The kind that weren't just ink on paper, but built on years of real work. By Friday afternoon, 3 of them had already scheduled meetings with me, off the record, to discuss future alignment. No one screamed. No fireworks. Just the soft, subtle click of shifting loyalties. And back at Redwood, I knew exactly what was happening. The silence after a storm, when leadership starts realizing the numbers aren't adding up. Monday was coming. But this time it wasn't their Monday. It was mine. And it was going to be loud. Monday arrived with overcast skies and the kind of eerie quiet that made the air feel heavy. I didn't set an alarm. I didn't put on a blazer or heels. I sat at my kitchen table in leggings and a soft sweatshirt, sipping coffee from my Revenue Queen mug, one of those office gag gifts that hit a little too close to home. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 8:12 a.m., I got a call from Jared Monroe, Director of Finance at Calyx Corp. "Emma, we've got a bit of a problem," he started, skipping the usual pleasantries. "Our renewal documents came through over the weekend, but they were from someone named Jordan Chase. He didn't introduce himself, just sent a templated form with your old email crossed out." I said nothing, letting the awkwardness sit. "I take it you're not there anymore?" "No," I said simply. "They decided to raise the bar. I wasn't invited." A pause, then a sigh. "We don't do business with people we don't know. And we certainly don't sign multi-million-dollar contracts with fresh grads who email like they're applying for an internship." I gave no suggestions, made no pitch, but he knew. And I knew. When trust moves, revenue follows. By noon, I'd heard from 2 more clients. Not loud protests or dramatic exits, just soft expressions of concern. We were under the impression you'd still be handling our portfolio. "Would you be open to a conversation? Off the record?" Meanwhile, I imagined Redwood's offices 2 miles away. Jordan fumbling to answer questions he didn't understand. Nathan checking spreadsheets that no longer made sense. The churn rate starting to tick upward. Quiet tension over morning coffee. Then came the email. Subject: urgent, strategic transition discussion. From Nathan Mercer. To Emma Sinclair. Time 2:17 p.m. Emma. "We've had some client feedback regarding the transition. A few are asking specifically for you, and there's confusion about coverage. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting arrangement to ease the shift. We're open to terms." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Elliot, my new boss at Stratagem. His reply was just 4 words. "Let them twist first." At 4:03 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Maya Bell, VP at Henderson Logistics, a $3.8 million account I'd brought in 3 years ago. "Emma, I just got off the phone with Redwood," she said, voice tight. "They said you weren't interested in continuing the relationship." I sat up straighter. "That's not true. They terminated me. I didn't leave voluntarily." Silence. Then Maya whispered, "I knew something was off." They sounded nervous, like they were trying to get ahead of something. "They are." Another silence, then a shift in tone. "Can you meet for lunch Wednesday?" I agreed, and she hung up with a quiet, "We should talk numbers." That night, as I stared out the window at the city lights, I realized something had clicked. The weight of being fired, of being deemed no longer enough, was gone. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. Because somewhere in a polished boardroom, they were just starting to understand the depth of what they'd lost. And the worst part? They did it to themselves. On paper, it looked like a clean decision. Refresh the team, bring in new energy, cut costs. But the paper didn't carry relationships. It didn't remember the early morning calls or the all-nighters before client deadlines. And paper certainly didn't know that Emma Sinclair's loyalty was never blind. It was earned. At 6:31 p.m., Elliot called. "I just got off the phone with Ventura Holdings," he said. "They asked if you were open to exclusive alignment if they shifted vendors." "And?" I asked. "I said I'd check with my new director of strategic accounts," he replied with a chuckle. "You good with that?" I leaned back in my chair, watching the last glow of daylight fade over the city. "I'm very good with that." We ended the call, and I opened my calendar. 4 off-the-record meetings scheduled this week. 2 in person, 1 over dinner, and 1 at a golf club. A place I hadn't set foot in since I closed the deal that funded Redwood's last expansion. It was almost poetic. They fired me because I didn't meet expectations. They said I'd plateaued. They thought I was done growing. But what they didn't understand was simple. The ceiling they saw? It wasn't mine. It was theirs. and they'd just built it right over their own heads. By Tuesday morning, the shift was no longer theoretical. I didn't need an internal report or access to Redwood's CRM to know what was happening. I could hear it in the hesitations during client calls, the cautious way people asked if I was available to explore alternatives, the sudden interest in exploring alignment models. These weren't inquiries, they were exits in motion. At 9:47 a.m., I received a LinkedIn message from Derek Liu, a mid-level project lead at Redwood. We'd worked together for years. "Hey, Emma, just wanted to say I'm sorry about how everything went down. Honestly, the team's been in shock. People are nervous, clients are calling and asking weird questions, ones we can't answer. It's tense here. Hope you're doing okay." I didn't reply, not because I wasn't grateful, but because I knew that message would be followed by many more. Once the ripple starts, the current pulls everything with it. By lunch, I was sitting across from Maya Bell at Henderson Logistics, a corner table at a restaurant where I'd once celebrated her company's 3-year renewal deal. "Emma, let me be direct," she said, placing her phone face down. "We've had 5 different people from Redwood reach out in the past week. 5. All with slightly different information, none of them you." I nodded slowly. I didn't leave voluntarily. They decided to go in a new direction. "Well," Maya said, leaning in, "you were the reason we stayed with Redwood. We weren't buying services. We were buying your brain." I didn't smile, but I felt a deep kind of satisfaction. She continued, "So, tell me, what would it take to shift everything over?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached into my bag and handed her a single-page summary, an outline of what service with stratagem would look like. No hard sell, just facts, numbers, and what she could expect working with me again. Her eyes scanned it quickly. "This is more clarity than we've had from Redwood in a week." I sipped my water and said, "I only move forward with clients who value consistency, transparency, and long-term partnership." She nodded. "Send me the paperwork by Friday." And just like that, $3.8 million began to float in a new direction. I walked out of the restaurant into the bright autumn sun, phone buzzing before I even reached the parking lot. Calyx Core. They wanted to reschedule their upcoming strategy meeting, this time to my new office. Not Redwood's. Ventura Holdings confirmed their legal team had begun reviewing options for early termination of their current contract. "We're not interested in transition calls with interns," Lydia's email read. "We'll wait for Emma." The quiet, corporate machine that had dismissed me as a line item was starting to stutter. That afternoon, Elliot stopped by my office, holding a printout. "Take a look at this," he said, setting the paper on my desk. It was a screenshot from Redwood's investor update page. A statement had been posted that morning. "Due to recent fluctuations in account stability, Redwood is reevaluating certain strategic partnerships and client-facing leadership roles to ensure optimal service continuity." Translation: clients were leaving and they were panicking. I leaned back in my chair. "And we haven't even gone public yet." Elliot grinned. "That's what makes this so beautiful. We're not even chasing them. They're coming to you." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about validation. They fired me because they assumed they could extract the value and replace the person. That trust, built over a decade, could be transitioned like a password or a shared folder. But what they never understood was that relationships don't live in databases. They live in people. And if you cut out the person, the bond dies with them. At 6:03 p.m., I received another message, this time from Nathan. "Emma, I understand that some of our legacy clients are in contact with you. While we respect your new role, I'd ask that you consider the long-standing relationship we've had. Let's find a way to collaborate to protect everyone's interests." I stared at it for a long moment. Protect everyone's interests. That was rich. Coming from the man who'd ended my 11-year tenure with a recycled line about ceilings and raised bars. I didn't respond. Because the truth was, there was no everyone anymore. They had made their decision. And now, the market was making its own. By the end of that week, 4 of Redwood's top 8 accounts had officially disengaged. Not through scandal or spectacle, but through formal termination notices sent to legal departments. Precise, cold, irreversible. The kind of letters that get read aloud in boardrooms by very pale executives. I hadn't sent a single one. Each decision came from clients who'd once sat across from me in hotel lounges and boardrooms. Clients who remembered that I returned calls on Sundays, stayed late to meet deadlines, and flew cross-country for a 1-hour conversation. Clients who remembered being seen, not just serviced. I didn't ask anyone to leave Redwood. I simply gave them the truth. And once they had it, they walked themselves to the exit. On Monday, Elliot walked into my office with a rare stillness in his face. "Emma," he said, placing a tablet in front of me. "You need to see this." It was a link to a Redwood staff memo that had been leaked online. Anonymous source. Published by a local business outlet. Due to ongoing client attrition and revenue instability, Redwood Dynamics will undergo internal restructuring. Executive Vice President Nathan Mercer will step down effective immediately. In his place, a transition committee will oversee strategic continuity. I read it twice. Nathan. Gone. He hadn't made it 6 weeks past my termination. I didn't smile. There wasn't anything to smile about. Because beneath the headlines and financial ripples, there was something quieter, heavier. The realization that loyalty had become a liability in modern business. That showing up, year after year, doing your job well, and building something meaningful wasn't enough to protect you. They'd built Redwood's growth on my back, and discarded me the moment a newer model came along. But what they forgot was that I wasn't part of the foundation. I was the architect. And when you fire the architect, the walls don't fall immediately. But eventually they do. That same day, my former assistant, Rita, messaged me from a personal number. "Hey, Emma, just letting you know they're losing their minds over here. There was a board meeting this morning, people yelling. No plan. No leadership. Just chaos. They keep mentioning your name like it's a curse word." I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some things don't need to be said. By midweek, Strategem's internal report showed a $6.2 million jump in new business, all redirected revenue from Redwood accounts. The number wasn't just symbolic. It was undeniable proof that the market had made its choice. But that night, sitting at my dining table, wine untouched, laptop screen still glowing, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Because behind every transferred account was a piece of my life. A dinner missed, a birthday rescheduled, a night spent on conference calls while Olivia fell asleep alone in her room. I'd built my career around being indispensable, until the day they decided I wasn't. I thought about calling Nathan, not to gloat, not to confront, just to ask him why. Why had he looked me in the eye and told me I'd hit a ceiling when he knew I was the ceiling? But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. He didn't believe in what I'd built, because he hadn't built anything himself. At Stratagem, we began prepping for a regional conference the following week. Elliot wanted me to speak on a panel about sustainable client relationships in volatile markets. He said I was the perfect case study. "People will listen to you," he told me, "because you're not just a theory, you're a consequence." The phrase stuck with me. A consequence. Not a disruptor, not a rebel, just a living, breathing consequence of what happens when leadership forgets that people, not processes, carry value. On Friday, my inbox pinged. Subject: meeting request, personal from Everett Langston CEO, Redwood Dynamics Emma. I realize a lot has transpired in the past month. I'd like to meet, off the record, no legal teams, just a conversation. I believe some apologies are overdue. Name a time and place and I'll be there. I stared at it for a long while. I didn't know what I would say, but I knew one thing for certain. They weren't just trying to stop the bleeding anymore. They were trying to understand where the wound began. And deep down, they already knew. It began the moment they let me walk out quietly. The meeting with Everett Langston was set for Monday morning, 9 a.m., At a neutral cafe just off downtown. Quiet. Understated. The kind of place you meet someone when you don't want the world to know you're meeting them. He was already there when I arrived. Dark blazer, no tie, coffee cup untouched in front of him. He stood when I approached, reached to shake my hand. I let him. "Emma," he said, forcing a small smile. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from him calmly, without expression. "You asked for a conversation. Let's talk." He sighed like someone already halfway through defeat. "You were right," he said without preamble. "About the clients, the relationships, the trust. We underestimated it all." I didn't nod. I didn't offer reassurance. I let the silence answer for me. We believed the accounts were tied to the brand, not the person." He shook his head. "It was a miscalculation, a costly one." 11 years, I said finally. That's how long I worked to make those relationships feel seamless. How long I showed up, carried the load, made the clients feel like they were part of something that worked. "I know," he said softly. "Do you?" I asked. "Because if you did, Nathan wouldn't have slid termination papers across my desk and called it raising the bar." Everett swallowed. "Nathan's gone." "That's not the point," I said. "The point is, Redwood built a house on trust, then decided to renovate by removing the foundation." He looked up at me, no defense left in his eyes. "You built something extraordinary. I'm sorry I didn't protect that." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the weight of what wasn't being said. The board's panic, the financial pressure, the scramble to control a collapse that began the moment I left. "Do you want something from me, Everett?" I asked. He hesitated. "We were hoping, if you'd consider consulting with us, even temporarily, help repair some of the damage, maybe salvage what's left of the big accounts." "No," I said. "Not with anger, just finality. Because they weren't asking for me. They were asking for the version of me they discarded. The one who hadn't realized yet how much she was worth." He nodded, almost as if he expected it. I figured, but I had to ask. We sat there for another moment, the clatter of coffee cups around us filling the silence. "I meant what I said," Everett added. "If you ever want to talk outside of business, you have my number." I stood and placed a few dollars on the table for the coffee I hadn't ordered. "I don't need to talk, Everett. I needed to be heard, and it's too late for that now." And with that, I left. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just complete. Because walking away with your head high isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you didn't need their approval to be right. Back at Stratagem, things were moving fast. We'd secured 6 new long-term accounts since my arrival. Our division had outperformed Q3 projections by 41%. Elliot had made it official. I would be heading our new national strategy team with equity built in from the ground up. Ownership, voice, respect, not perks, not bonuses. Just the foundation of a place that saw people as value, not tools. On Thursday, we held a team lunch to celebrate our new hires. 3 rising strategists, all women, all sharp, all hungry. I watched them laugh over tacos and trading stories from previous roles where their ideas were ignored, their loyalty taken for granted. I pulled one of them aside. Amira, a quick-witted analyst with eyes that saw 10 steps ahead. "Just one thing," I told her. "Don't ever let them convince you that your ceiling is their measurement of success. The moment they say you've hit your limit, remember, it's probably just theirs you've surpassed." She smiled. Noted. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, wine glass in hand, watching the skyline flicker. I thought about Redwood, about Everett, about Nathan and that quiet Friday morning when everything had changed. And I realized something. They didn't fire me because I failed. They fired me because I succeeded too quietly. Because I didn't beg for validation, I earned it. And that scared them more than anything else. Olivia came out with a blanket and sat beside me. "You're smiling," she said. Like, really smiling. "I am," I said. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay," I told her. "I finally built something no one can take from me." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that until the sky turned from deep blue to black. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. Because success isn't the meetings you attend. It's not the title or the office view. It's the power to walk away and know that what you carry with you is still enough to build an empire.